the lesson of Logos and Letters. My name is Liam. Just recapping, covering a few points before we move on. First and foremost, the primary reason that we're spending so much time on the idea of truth and falsity and statements and opinions and all these other things and scribbling these indecipherable hieroglyphs up here is because it is foundational, essential, critical to the discussion of things that change. Things that change are pretty much the 9 other categories that we looked at in chapter 4, the supreme genera, especially things like action, things like relation, things like when something happened, where it happened, quantity, quality, all these things they can change, and language needs to accurately reflect it, and we need to be able to understand accurately how people are describing these things that can change. Okay, we need to understand the idea that time can allow for these things to change to the point where the fact of the matter is altered from when they were referencing it. How to interpret this, how to understand this, So, for example, he says this one line here, thought I should go over again. Haplos gar uthen, hup udenos ute hologos kinaitai ute hedoxa. So, he's saying that generally speaking, there is nothing that is said to move the statement or the opinion. What do you mean by move? He doesn't mean like geometrically or geographically or any sort of thing like that. He means moving it from truth to falsity. Okay, there's nothing that's said to move it from truth to falsity in itself, and he's speaking about a idea, a proposition, or a opinion in a general sense. So just the thought in your head. If I have the thought in my head right now, the hippopotamus is big, okay? It's just a statement in my head. I'm not actually applying it to reality. There is no hippopotamus in my surroundings right now, okay? Thanks be to God. It'd be hard to do this lesson with such a circumstance, but the circumstance doesn't exist. I'm not applying it to reality. That statement, okay, statement X, we'll call it statement X, because I don't want to have to keep saying the word hippopotamus. That statement, just as a thought itself, has the capacity to be true or false. All right. When applied to reality, that's when it is true or false. Okay. So a statement just in itself, an opinion in itself, in your head, not applied to reality, has the potential to be true or false, depending on if it is how it is applied to reality, when it is applied to such and such circumstances. Okay, so he's conceptualizing sometimes the statement and the opinion as like something purely intellectual, not applied. Okay, not applied to like an action or something like that. And then there's the difference when it is applied, and we've spoken about that, ad nauseum, and I don't want to overdo it. Everything, all good things, are done in moderation. And God, it's annoying how it only does the highlighter and not the pen stuff. All right, so the final point that we need to go over is that substance is the only thing that can remain one in number and experience these contraries. He gives the example here that it can experience sickness and health, and it can be the receptacle of these things, these contraries, and also of colors. Okay, so like of whiteness and blackness. Okay, a particular body, say a fence, can be white at one time and black at another time. And that's obvious, okay? But a statement, all right, purely intellectual, just in your head, not applied, has the capacity to be both. It's not actually both at the same time. Now that's a really good point to make, and I'm really proud of myself for remembering to say that. It's not actually the case that it's true and false at the same time. A statement can't be that. If it's purely intellectual in your head, your opinion or your statement not applied to reality, it has the capacity for both, but it isn't actually both. Okay, now that I've said that, like the same thing 3 different ways, we're going to move on from it and take this image, take this painting for example. Say you were there witnessing it, okay? Now, we know there'd be far more wounds and blood and gore to witness, and it'd be quite a confronting scene, of course, but he's given up the ghost, and we hear the Roman soldiers say, "Vere hocerat filius Dei," right? So truly, this was the Son of God, and we're standing there, and someone says, "Jesus is dead," right? He is referencing. Now he says "is," right? And now this is the fine point. This is the subtle point. Is, okay, means currently, like is happening. It's the present indicative, okay? It's the present indicative, and it's connecting dead to the subject, Jesus, right? So it's affirming, it's an affirmation saying that Jesus is currently dead, okay? So that's, thank you, Captain Obvious. But now, if it's Monday, the following Monday, and he says Jesus is dead, someone can correct him and go, "No, that's false." And that has tremendous implications, but it's because the passage of time has allowed it, and Jesus's current state is that he's living. So it is true to affirm that the contrary, which is that Jesus is alive. Now, the contrary is in the second important point. If it's true to say Jesus is dead at one point, the contrary to say is to say Jesus is alive, right? It's opposite. It's the opposite state. Being alive and being dead are the opposite states. So obviously they sort of match up on either side of the truth and falsity spectrum, if you want to say that. And anyway, so if you're saying such a thing, any sort of thing, there's a contrary to it. So you can say Jesus is being crucified. Jesus is. But when it's in the past tense, you need to switch that verb. All right? If you're speaking about possession, for example, you can say he has this. But if it's in the past, you have to say he has. Right? He had. Okay. He used to have. He had. Okay. And the same with how we predicate using the verb to be. You need to change it. Jesus was dead. All right, you can say that in the present right now. You can say Jesus was dead, and that's true. You're not actually in that. You're not in the 3 days, the 72 hours between the crucifixion and the resurrection from the tomb. We weren't present there, and we weren't present there in the upper room where they saw really firsthand that Jesus really was alive and fulfilling his promises. Okay, but and one of them in that room could have gone out at that time and said Jesus was dead. We can also say that too. All right, and that's perfectly fine. And what that is teaching us is a very important and interesting point, that our verbs, the verbs that we use, play an essential role, of course, but it also points to the fact that statements in and of themselves aren't bound by time, okay? But the reference that they make when they're applied to reality is bound by time, okay? So just as thoughts, they're not bound by time, they're timeless, they're like eternal, but as when applied, when practical, when employed, they are bound by time. So some really fine points, some obvious points, of course. I mean, the grammar lesson I just gave you is as obvious and as already known as it comes, but sometimes we need to use the basics to approach the complex, and that was one such case. So substance has it in unique to it that it is the one thing that can accept contraries, that can just persist, and things can come and go with it. We've seen how statements are not that. Statements are far more nuanced. They're not really a Rolex watch in their complexity. They're more like a string of code. If this, then that. Okay, and I don't know how to code. I know the concepts behind coding, but I bet if anyone does know how to code here, they would have many stories of how once you start typing up a lot of it, once you start applying it to really important things, even the slightest misstep can ruin it. Okay, even the slightest few lines or few letters even, or numbers or symbols can ruin it, and that is the case with propositions and opinions, doxa, hedoxa, especially because we are applying it now to accidents. The first one will be quantity, tu de posu. So let's just finish up this line and then we'll look at that. All right, so hosteidionan usias ie to tauton kai henarithmoi on dektikon ainai ton enantion katatein hiutes metabolein perimenun usias to sauta airesto. Okay, so 2 lines here. Let's just quickly cover it. And idion, meaning unique, peculiar. So thus it is peculiar, and that is peculiar of substance, that it is one in number, and it is capable of being a receptacle, dektikon, of contraries. I say receptacle because receptacle is something that takes up, receives, so I'm just using that word there. Katatein hiutes metabalein, change, is because in itself the change happens in the on the substance. Like the substance is sort of like imagine a dish, a silver bowl or basin, or even a kitchen sink. You plug it. The change is all this is like the liquid in it. Okay, the water or the wine or the oil or whatever it is that is in the dish, the sink, either one, however you want to conceptualize it. That's how the change relationship occurs. Okay, so imagine how like you can make a mixture, you can make a punch, you can make a whatever in that bowl, but the bowl stays the same. The bowl persists, but all that liquid in it comes and goes and changes in quantity and its quality as well, and all these other things. And that's what this sentence here is getting at. Okay, so the substance, the bowl, is one in number. It's capable of receiving these changes of these contraries. Okay, even the water in the bowl can go from being boiling to cold eventually. Okay, and vice versa. And perimenun usias tos auta airesto. So let this much be said about, therefore let this much be said about substance that is one in number, capable of receiving contraries, because the change occurs upon it. It is capable of experiencing this change without being changed itself, and yeah, it's unique to substance. So let's have a look at our first accident now. Chapter 6, a brand new chapter. Tu de posu to men esti diorismenon to de sunekes kai to men ek thesin akonton pros alela tonenautois morion suneke, right? So this first part of quantities, these words are going to be super, super important. All right, we're going to be speaking about these words a lot. Here, morion, so parts. Before I get stuck into this, let's just be clear about chapter 6. Chapter 6 is going to be all about discrete and continuous quantities. Now, if you did enjoy mathematics in primary school, high school, university, whatever, that's fine, neither did I. But all you need to know about discrete and continuous quantities is that discrete quantities are like a fixed, defined limit amount. I think we've covered that maybe for about 10 minutes before in a previous lesson. Continuous quantities are things that have no real set boundaries. Okay, so take time, right? Time is a continuous quantity. It has no real set boundaries for us anyway. We can conceive of conceptual parts of time, of course, past, present, and future, but there is no real boundary to time itself. Another one, like things like sound, things like repeating numbers even is technically a continuous quantity. So we're going to be looking at those. We're going to be analyzing their uniqueness, okay, because they do have things that are unique and peculiar, and when they relate to other things that we're learning, interesting conclusions and if this then that sort of things occur. So that's a look at chapter 6, but chapter 6 is not just all about mathematics, of course. It's applied to physical, real entities. So cross quantities, you can analyze everything that has to do with number, really, but number relates to so much, even if you look at the Bible. So of course I don't want to Bible bash in this course because logic and language might attract many secular people, and I don't want to make them feel stifled or claustrophobic with Bible verses being flicked around. But just for a quick mention, so much of the Bible has to do with quantity. So 7 days in a week, 7 years, and I think the 7 years is called the Shemitah, and we've got this Sabbath. So for the seventh day, we've got 12 tribes. We've got a whole book in the Pentateuch called Numbers, arithmoi in the Septuagint, and I forget what the Hebrew word is for it, but every time a number is used in the Bible, what I'm trying to get at is another opportunity for you to use chapter 6 in the categories to understand it better. Every time that Jesus says, I and the Father are one, then that's another opportunity to use chapter 6, and obviously every other chapter, because as I mentioned before, these things aren't in isolation. They build upon one another. They are a continuous evolving sort of mass that we are learning from, a corpus that's ever growing, ever changing. So every time a number is conceived of, is needed to explain something, it is another opportunity for chapter 6. So just in that explanation alone, you might be able to conceive or perceive how important this mathematical themed chapter is. Okay, it's not just pure maths and just like another high school math lesson. Au contraire, it is very, very applicable to an extraordinarily great amount of different topics, any topic that has to do with quantity whatsoever. So I'll leave that there, and we'll dive into this topic, looking specifically at words like this. I mean, you can see it already. Look, sunekes, morion, morion again, sunaptai. So sunaptai again. So you can see the orismenon. These are sort of the trailer, if you will, like a movie, for what's coming up next. Desin, positions. So we will have a look at that, dive into it. I'm excited. I hope you are too. If you're not, that's okay. I completely understand. Thank you so much for your time. And as always, si semper fortis in opere tuo. My name is Liam, and I'll see you next time.